Roger Prince is going to tell us about some tales of Treasure Island that he experienced growing up in the area. And I'm Bob Dowling with the Treasure Island Historical Society, and we're making the Tales of Treasure Island. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
Roger, how'd you get here? What happened?
Well, Bob, my family moved here in 1955. My dad had a job at the St. Pete Times. My mom worked for the Pinellas County Health Department, and we moved into we initially rented down on Lakeview Avenue. Most people call it 22nd Avenue South, but we called it Lakewood back in or Lakeview, excuse me, back in the 50s. Rented there for a year and had a house built by Bear Creek in the Pasadena area, where I grew up as a child, attended Pasadena Elementary and Bear Creek Elementary, went on to Distant Bogey, St. Pete JC, and USF St. Pete campus, and never left town. So one of my earliest memories of Treasure Island was obviously going to the beach, because we lived just over the bridge. When my parents, who had a station wagon, took the neighborhood kids to the beach, we went to Passer Grill. That was their favorite beach. But when the neighbor lady, Mrs. Langford, took us to the beach, we went to Sunset Beach, because there was a bar there called the Penguin, bar and restaurant. Penguin, a very famous place, and a nice little public beach right next to it. And she could sit in the bar and watch us on the beach. At the time, we didn't think anything of it, but you know, by today's standards, having a caretaker sitting in a bar drinking while watching you on the beach is probably even against the law. But that was my earliest memory of Treasure Island, going as a child with the neighborhood kids to Sunset Beach. We didn't have a lot of money growing up as kids, and many a Friday night we would spend in this family station wagon just driving the beaches, because back the old days, neon lights were kind of the thing for all the motels, and no air conditioning, of course, in the car. We would just drive down the boulevard, bring our own lemonade in the Scotch cooler, and just look at neon lights. And a real treat would be stopping at the little soft serve place there right at the foot of the Blind Pass Bridge on the Treasure Island side.
Tasty Freeze or something like that.
I forget the name of the place, but I just remember mosquitoes and ice cream dripping down my arm as a kid, you know. And spending family time. You know, we didn't, let's say, we didn't have a lot of money, and we enjoyed that. We'd drive all the way up to maybe Reddington and drive back, and that'd be it. You know, if we had a few extra bucks, we'd go to the Skyview Drive-In. But my memories of Treasure Island from childhood are being very family-oriented. When I came to my teen years, I think it was 14, I got a job as technically called a cabana boy, working for Clyde Taylor. And there were a number, I was 14, 15, but there were a couple of kids that were 16, 17 who were, you know, older kids. One was Tom Wertenberger, I remember him distinctly. Another fellow named Danny Palm. The two kids my age were Phil Strain, who passed recently, and Gary Storm, who I believe is still on the beach. But we were the new kids. You know, he worked us to death. Let me tell you, Clyde Taylor was a real slave driver. One of the fairest guys I've ever worked for, and I think back on my work history. He taught us a lot. We were kids. But he had a very specific way how he wanted his equipment maintained, how you dealt with customers, and we learned a lot from him. Worked very, very hard, out in full sun. Think about the skin cancer I could have prevented in the old days and didn't, but you know, we were kids, didn't think much of it. But I remember Mr. Taylor having, I believe he was deputized. He was a city police officer. He carried a badge under his shirt, but he rarely used it. It was only when somebody was really acting out that he would have to enforce the law, so to speak, on the beach. And he ran the beach, ran a pretty tough beach, if I recall. But he was also one of the most physically fit guys. This is back during Jack LaLanne days, and I remember his background was adagio dancing. He was a performer in his early days, but he was very fit. I remember him showing off and doing one-finger pull-ups, and I remember seeing him pick his Jeep up once. I mean, just, you know, we were kids. It's like, oh my God, you know, you better not mess with this guy. He's strong, you know, dark leather skin, the pith helmet. He just looked like some Marine out of the jungles of World War II. You know, he had a very distinct look about him. But I remember Clyde Taylor very, very well. Locking those umbrellas, you know, you had a very specific way to fold them, and a cable that was just the right length, and the padlocks were all rusty, but you squirted them with
WD
what was
whatever.
long before WD-40 was invented, but he had to keep the goo off the fabric, and it was a very specific way he wanted things done, but it made sense, because, you know, once he explained it to you on your first day on the job, it's like, yeah, I could see that. Same with the cabanas and locking the chairs together. There was a way of locking them so that nobody could sit on them, nor could they steal them.
Did you have a lot of theft back then?
I'm sorry, Tom.
Was there a lot of theft of the beach cabanas?
No, because Clyde Taylor knew how to lock his chairs. I assume he learned the hard way from the beginning how to do things and not to do things. And it was real obvious to anybody that met him that he had a very specific way through trial and error that he learned how to do things, and he imparted that to us.
Yeah.
This is how things are done here at the beach. I remember, come to think of it, the St. Pete Municipal Beach, which is where he was set up. There was a woman named, her last name was Purvis, Mrs. Purvis. I remember that name because of the whole Elliot Ness thing, you know, but she was the woman that ran the municipal beach, you know, big beehive white hair and very grandmotherly kind of image, but also somebody who was a very strict businesswoman, had a way that she ran the concession, locker room, whole beach fee thing. But she liked us because, you know, we weren't problems to her. We would solve problems, help her out, do favors for her and whatnot. But come to think of it, Mrs. Purvis was somebody I remember from the Clyde Taylor days. After work here, I remember Gary Storm's brother Mike worked at the A&W root beer stand, which is now the R Bar. Of course, having an inside connection, we'd get, I think they called them Frosties at the time. It was like a root beer float. But we'd slide by after work, and, you know, we're just dead tired. But a nice big Frosty, especially a free one, was always a nice treat. And Gary lived on Treasure Island at the time, so it was a nice local connection to have. Not long after I got my driver's license at 16, learner's permit at 14, if you recall her, but at 16 you got your independence, as any teenager will admit. I met Joe Nuzzo from Suncoast Surf Shop, and my life changed dramatically at that point. I became a surfer dude and hung out majority of my teenage years at the surf shop and with the surf shop people, met all the quote beach people out on Sunset Beach, and really enjoyed the area a lot. Rented out there shortly in my college years, and then moved to St. Pete Beach in the early 70s. But Treasure Island has a very fond spot in my heart for my formative years, not only in childhood, but those teenage years that I reflect back on now because my memory's pretty good about those days, but some things a little hazy.
How about the 4th of July celebrations there? Any 4th of July celebration memories?
I don't remember specific ones. Again, my family was, we lived just over the bridge past the Bear Creek area, so that 4th of July was backyard picnics with
You remember the Impacts playing there on Sunday? The Impact Band?
Yeah, I remember going to Cotillion at the Treasure Island Civic Center Auditorium, whatever they call it. I mean, it was that whole city complex. Everything was one building, if I recall. I think the cops were next door. Cops, garbage trucks, one side, then the city hall and everything else. And who was it that played out there? Was it Jimi Hendrix played there? I think Jimi Hendrix played a show in town, and then he came out and sat in once on a like a little local band thing, and he just kind of showed up.
Wow.
I recall that story from, I didn't see him, but I recall that story from somebody that was put
cool.
Treasure Island on the map, sort of.
Okay.
No, I remember a lot about Sunset Beach. The houses that were out on stilts, I think they were actually built on land when they were built. They were just built on pilings, and the beach washed out at some point in the early 70s that they appeared to be stilt houses like the old fisherman shacks. But you know, every couple of years there'd be a hurricane and wash a couple more away.
Now, do you remember the road that used to be down, apparently there was one road further west of West Gulf Boulevard right now. Do you remember any of that?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the connection of A&W with your friend?
My friend's name was Gary Storm, the guy that went to high school
Yeah,
at the Bowie,
what was
my age, and his older brother Mike Storm was like a soda jerk
Oh,
there
so he
at the
worked there.
A&W. But he was older, he was 2 years older, and when you're 14, a 16-year-old with a license is practically an adult. So, like I say, it was always good to have a connection, somebody with a driver's license and somebody to give you free Frosties at A&W.
Right, that's good, I like that one.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, Gary his family lived on Paradise Island back when the houses had just been built. I mean, most of the homes were new there, and like our house, a lot of them were built without air conditioning, had attic fans.
Right, we
And,
remember that. Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk,
Yeah,
all
I
that.
still have one in my house with Pass the Grill I use regularly. But as kids growing up, we thought that was great. At night, you just open your window and close off all the other windows in the house, and you got a nice breeze coming in.
What year did you graduate Bogosiega?
1969.
69, I graduated 65,
Okay.
so we're alma mater. That's cool.
How about storms coming in when you worked out there? Was there any problem or any memory with any hurricanes or while you were working with Taylor?
Well, the earliest I remember was Dawn on 60. That was the first one. I would have been 9 years old at the time. Distinctly remember looking out my bedroom window there in the Bear Creek area and seeing the trees do this. And although the hurricane didn't impact our area, it came close enough to give everybody a pretty good scare. I remember many first days of school in the fall having a hurricane day. It seemed like there were 2, 3, 4 years in a row when we had days off from school, either the first day or the first week of school because of potential storm problems. I remember 72, because I was in college and renting a place out on Sunset Beach, that major damage out there at the time. There was no injury or lost life that I recall, but a lot of damage. I have some photographs of that area, not only personal ones, but some press photos.
And how did you get around? What was your first automobile? or motorcycle?
I inherited my mother's Volkswagen Bug. It was 65, and I got it in 69, so it was fairly new. But it had a 40-horse engine. I wasn't setting any land speed records with it, but I had surf racks on the top and a Hanson sticker on the back window. So I kind of fit in with the beach crowd there, and I didn't really care that much about cars. And the cars were a big deal, the muscle cars in the 60s, but I could barely afford gas for the Volkswagen I had. And I, of course, admired all the other rich kids' fancy cars, but I didn't care. I had a job, I owned a surfboard, and life was good.
How about hanging out at Joe Nuzzo's surf shop? What was that like?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's just there's no waves here. There's no surf. We would go over the East Coast to catch waves, but we were all part of the surf scene, having the right clothing and like any teenager wanting to fit in, we did the same thing and always leave your surf racks on no matter how bad they rusted. But we hung out at the shop. There was a little one-car garage that was part of there was a cottage originally with a detached garage out back, and that was the repair shop. And everybody used to hang out back and watch the one guy working, and we all stand around smoking cigarettes watching the one guy working. But later on, Joe air-conditioned what was then the living room of that cottage. If you recall, it was just the front porch of the building was the surf shop. And the living room was converted into there was a pool table and a jukebox in there. And that's where we hung out. And in the winter, he had a heater, and in the summer, he had an air conditioner, a pool table, a jukebox. That was the place to hang. Was hanging with Joe, and it's where I met a lot of the other guys from other high schools that were also into the surf scene that weren't our friends and neighbors at the beach, but were from St. Peter Northeast High School areas, and got to know them. Still keep up with many of the guys that I met in high school days through Joe Nuzzo, the Suncoast Surf Shop. Good times, good times. Nice people too. Great crowd.
And we all enjoyed the Skyview Drive-In Theater. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the garden later.
Well, the Skyview was real close to our house. I remember sneaking in the back of that as a kid. I'd tell my folks, I'm going over to Jeff's house across the street. Jeff tell his parents the same thing. He's go over to my house. We'd take off our bikes and we'd ride over Bear Creek and sneak in the back of the Skyview. And there was a hole in the fence. I don't know who. I can't imagine who did that, but we'd sneak in and get on the very last row of speakers and listen in. And we knew the manager's pickup. He'd make rounds about once every 45 minutes, I guess. And we'd see him coming, beat it out the back fence, and then sneak back in. you know, it was just getting away with it. We weren't really into the movies that much. It was just we're out, you know. But when I got my license, when I was 16, of course, going on dates and parking in that same back row was a popular thing to do, even in a Volkswagen Bug. I remember stuffing Phil Strain in the trunk of my Volkswagen once to smuggle him in, because he used to charge by the head. And if you've ever owned a Volkswagen Bug, you know how real small that trunk is. But he was able to curl up into a ball, and I got him in there and got the thing clicked shut. I did that more than once, if I recall. I remember once not letting him out, too.
What did you do later in life, as far as?
Well, I moved on. Once I got my degree,
a degree in what degree?
Psychology from
okay.
USF Bayboro. It was a liberal arts degree. It was just a fun thing to do. I didn't really have any career in mind at the time. It was just I wanted to go to college and be a college degree guy. So when I left school in '73, if you recall, it was a bad time economically. It was real tough to find a job, and I bumped around for about a year and I got a job at the Pinellas County Health Department, where ironically my mother had worked for 15, 20 years, and she had moved on to work for Jack Eckerd, the Eckerd Youth Alternative. And then we had a lot of friends in the health department, and at the time my father had just gotten a job there, the engineering division, and he said he could pull some strings and get me a job, which he did. I worked in the epidemiology department for several years, and I went back to graduate school for not long, didn't last long. I started selling real estate, got bit by the real estate bug, and got my salesman's license initially, and worked for a couple of guys out here locally, Kenny Olson briefly.
Kenny Olson, yeah.
I worked for the Caldwells down at Gulfport for a while, and Don Menard for a while. But then got my broker's license and just stayed independent. So, but I got my captain's license as well, did boat deliveries, Corinthian Yacht, did some deliveries for them, and some independents, and CSY in Tampa. I made a living in the maritime business for a number of years, and I got in the rock and roll tour bus driving business about 15 years ago. That's another long story, but I was on the road for a number of years, probably, 4 or 5 years, I guess, touring the country with various bands and seeing America. So it's a lot of fun, seeing the country. It's a lot of work, though. Don't let anyone tell you that's a fun job. It's a lot of work, a lot of work. Driving all night, sleeping all day.
Down on Joe's house at 80th Avenue. Huh?
Yes.
I had the house on 80th Terrace.
Very good memory.
Yes, and
Yeah, I spent a few nights there myself.
yeah.
But I tended bar briefly at the Sansa Bar back in '73 as my senior year in college. In fact, I lived a block over from Joe's old place. Moved in with a couple of girls. It was Larry Onker's ex-wife, Tina. They had just split up, and I moved in. And it was tending bar. I had the world by the tail. I was my senior year in college. My last quarter was real easy, and tending bar, one of the most popular bars, the beach. I'm living with a girl a half a block away, and man, life's good, Then I graduated and had to wake up that, now it's time to get a job and
Here we go.
and be somewhat responsible. So
Well,
it took about a year to work those kinks out.
That's a nice
Do you
case.
remember when Joe went to jail?
Very distinctly.
Yeah.
I remember the girl that put him there too. I went to high school with her. I don't think I'll mention any names right now, but yeah, he sold an ounce of pot. She set him up. He thought he was going to get some companionship with her.
Yeah.
All over an ounce of pot. He ended up doing 6 months in state prison for that. Treasure Island police were targeting him at the time. He was a high-profile guy, and they just wanted him out of there, and they got their wish. They set him up. So, but I used to take his mother down there to visit, down at the road camp down there in Arcadia. I'm sure there's a name for it, but it's that state prison that's still there down on Route 70.
Yeah.
I used to take his mom down there about once every 6 weeks for a visit, and that was always a trip, driving my Volkswagen Bug, and she used to drink a little bit too, and she'd bring a bottle of Vicks cough syrup, which didn't have any cough syrup in it. I think it was slow jet or something,
Yeah,
but she'd be, you know, take a sip or two
this
of
will be
that.
good for, when Joe writes his book, this
Yeah,
will be good.
and Walter Stubbs never got him, you know? I mean, he wanted that sub
Yeah.
shop off the island for years.
Yeah, Joe was a long-haired wild guy, you know, he just loved life. We look back on it now and it's like, that's the lifestyle everybody envied, was being a carefree beach guy with a business, surrounded by women, surfing, you know, it was just like, it's like, yeah, this is the scene.
Yeah.
And, but everybody was smoking pot, a few people were dealing it.
Oh, yeah.
More than a few people were dealing it. And he got snagged, selling an ounce of pot to a girl he thought he was gonna, you know, curry favor with, and she was setting him up like a bowling pin, so.
Too bad.
Yeah, it is, but, you know, Joe learned his lesson, you know, he got out of prison and didn't touch a single joint since then, and has actually done quite well for himself, as we all know.
How about drug dealing on Sunset Beach? Do you remember anything happening?
Oh, yeah, it was rampant.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was either stoned or dealing it, you know, it was,
And the Zanzibar was the focal point?
Zanzibar bar got busted. Ironically, one of the few weekends off I had was the weekend they got busted. I was up camping at some music festival in Gainesville I wanted to go to. Actually, it asked for this weekend off a month in advance, and I get a phone call saying, "Hey, we need you back. You're the only bartender not in jail." So I had to cut my trip short.
What was the names of the bartenders? Do you remember them?
Jeez. You know, I don't remember. I remember the name of the bar owner at the time, a guy named Andre Foucault and his wife Laura, and they were oblivious to what was going on. I think maybe they might have known but didn't care, not didn't care, but maybe turned a blind eye to it. I'm not sure. If I recall the story, it was the fellow checking IDs at the door. The bar was very popular, and of course they were concerned about beverage agents selling underage kids and all this stuff. So they had a fellow up front checking IDs, and if I recall the story, it was he and he alone was the one that was responsible for the drugs being associated with the Zanzibar back in '73. There was no, they didn't pull the liquor license. They couldn't prove that the ownership or even the bartending employees were anyway involved. It was strictly this fellow out front that was checking IDs. But when they, quote, raided the bar, of course, everybody that's holding drugs drops drugs on the floor of the bar and splits. So when the cops come in, okay, now everybody, you know, that's working or owning is going to jail because now there's drugs in the bar, which had little or nothing to do with the guy up front selling it.
Sure.
You know, this was everybody's stash. So, but man, I had that weekend off. I came back.
Lucky you.
Well, you know, the word was out. They didn't open up. That was a Saturday night raid, if I recall, and I opened up Sunday, but there was nobody there because everybody was scattered. So,
What was the thorn, the doctor's name that lived just north of the Zanzibar that was the thorn on Andre's tail?
I don't recall.
He committed suicide
Right next to the parking lot.
right next to the
I
parking lot.
think the house was blue at the time.
Yeah,
That's a new one on me.
yeah.
I do have another quick story. There was I guess this was in the '70s. There was a house real close to Barb's place. Years ago, it was called Maison Klein. It was a restaurant that it was also called the Marquita, M-A-R-K-I-T-A, the Marquita.
It was a restaurant?
Yeah, it was right where Bayshore Boulevard meets West Gulf.
Oh,
There's
on the beach.
there's a condo there, and then right next to the condo on the south side was right there, if I recall. But I've got some neat old pictures of it. I'll show you. In the '70s, it was rented by. It had been converted to rental property. There were 4 guys living there. Art Nicholson, who passed recently. Tom Tubbs. Who else? Alan Bliss.
Alan, yeah.
And Jonesy, Tom Jones lived there. 4 guys. Their common bond was sailing. These guys all had either Hobie cats or the British-made Tornado cats, and their backyard was just littered with sailboats and parts, and you know, 4 young guys, big-time party house. It was pretty wild place if I recall, but sailing was the big thing. On the weekends, everybody went out for sailboat ride, and they would actually race these tornadoes. They're extremely lightweight and very fast boats. And these guys are just into it. But I remember going out there for a few parties.
You have any memories of the Gulf Coast cats, catamarans?
Yeah, Gene Gammon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Gene. Steve Brown.
Ed Duell.
I just remember the building, you know, the old, I believe that was the old Cypress Club, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where the building was.
Bar, it was a bar. Wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, that was back in the 70s.
What did Gene have to do with it? Was he operating it?
Yeah, he owned it. He owned
Gulf Coast
Gulf
Cat?
Coast Catamarans.
Was there-
G-Cat was Gene,
G-Cat.
as in
Oh,
Gene Gammon.
okay, all right. We
G-Cat.
gotta get Gene in
Yeah.
here.
Now, did Gene sell that to Ed Duell? Remember Ed Duell owned it?
I do, and I don't recall the deal, Tom.
I can't remember it either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Mr. Dilly was next door.
Yeah.
Remember him?
Oh, yeah.
He was an interesting fellow. And then his daughter Maggie was, show you what a small town this is, was one of Joe Nuzzo's girlfriends back in the 70s.
Would have been.
But I remember he ran a pool service, and my father was in the engineering division of the health department, and he would have frequent dealings with Mr. Dilly over certain theories of pool maintenance, of which he didn't necessarily agree with state law. So he and my dad locked horns a few times. But
Do you remember when we used to have a meat market in that building? For a short while, there was a meat market.
in the GCAT building, you mean?
In Dilly's.
Oh, Dilly's. Yes, I do, as a matter of fact.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a way back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a service station where the 7-Eleven is called Ed's. Vaguely remember that.
Okay.
Of course, the Seabreeze, Hank Seabreeze, everybody loved Hank's.
Country and Western.
Yeah, the music wasn't our style, but it was a cool place because they had these little cottages out back, and you could always drink on the beach. That was an alternative to going to the Driftwood Inn at the time. Yeah, it was a different crowd, older crowd.
If you got kicked out of one place, you could go to the other.
Yeah, well, the Driftwood Inn was always our style place. It was also one of the closest places to the surf shop. Other than, I got to come to think of it, I got another great story. There was a place called the Red Barn across the street from the surf shop, down a couple lots. An old restaurant, but a lot of people remember it as being a kind of like a steakhouse kind of place. But I remember it as being one of the few places that would serve me underage. I had a pretty good fake ID, like most teenagers did at the time, and I remember having more than a beer or two there at the old Red Barn. There was a bartender there. His nickname was Superman. That was just his moniker. But he would, if you had a fairly decent fake ID, he'd serve you. Remember, drafts were a quarter. As long as you tipped him, you got served. So
I think that was owned by Charlie Lentz, was the owner of the Red Barn. Charlie Lentz, L-E-N-T-Z.
name does ring a bell.
I got a note here. It said, what was Ken Olson's restaurant name? Ken Olson, he had a restaurant there across by Blind Pass Bridge, which was Cosmeco's.
Whose restaurant?
Kenny Olson,
Oh, that was the,
Golden Tree.
I want to call it the Lighted Tree, or that was Paso Grill.
Golden Tree.
Golden.
Something.
It was a
something
gold tree.
Yeah, because when you walked in, there was this fancy
Yeah.
ornamentation side. Yeah,
Cosmacos.
It is, yeah.
yeah. When you
Before
opened
Cos-
that was supposed to be the cat's meow of the beach at the time, and it was. You know, he was a high flying realtor at the beach at the time, and everybody wanted to be around a successful guy. You know, he had the race boats, the fancy cars, and the rapidly expanding real estate business. Yeah, that was kind of. Well, he had a lot of competition back then. You know, a lot of people. If I recall, he asked an 8% commission. Everybody else in town was 7%. And of course, he would say, "Well, we're worth it because we're that much more professional." Well, there were a lot of really, really good realtors out here, and I think the public got wind of the fact that you know, we can save 1% commission, deal with somebody with just as much integrity, and save 1% of a deal, which is a substantial amount of money if you look at it sitting there in cash.
It's true.
So,
Gus Diamond, remember Gus Diamond and Sid Rice opened the,
yep,
what was it called, the crab market? Across the pass there from Treasure Island?
yep,
on
I have a
Line.
postcard of that.
Yeah.
I sure do. I remember Dick Seidel at Dick and Millie's.
That was a good place.
Yeah. And Doc Ford's, or not Doc Ford, Larry Ford. Larry Ford had a place up there as well.
I've heard of
Do
it.
you recall it?
I've heard of it, I don't.
Yeah, his original location was Tampa. And then he came over to Treasure Island, opened up a place. Had another name. I think it was only Larry Ford's for a year or two, but he moved on as well.
All right, we're gonna wind this up, Roger.
Okay.
We wanna thank Roger for providing over 600 postcards, historic postcards of the islands and areas and the points of interest close by. And
I'm
that's
glad to help, and I
that's a
hope,
great collection, and we appreciate being able to utilize that for our historic archives for the Treasure Island Historic Society. Thank you very much.